To this week's edition of the Casual Shooters Podcast, your premier podcast for the casual shooter. This week you have me, your host, Dave. You have Leo.
Hello.
He does this every time. Good Lord. Huggy.
What's up, people?
And a yet-to-be-revealed guest. Now, this week's guest comes by way of Rob Epifania. If you remember from his interview, he consulted with what we call a performance psychologist. If you don't remember, well, shame on you. So anyway, I looked her up. Sure enough, lots of information, and it seemed like she will be an amazing guest on the show. So without any further ado, let's bring in Dr. Meaghan Sullivan. How you doing?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on. And happy 4th of July, since it's this weekend.
Likewise. Same to you.
And why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Dr. Meaghan Sullivan. I'm a performance psychology specialist. So what that means is I work with people in a variety of performance domains, whatever performance looks like for you, whether it's in sports or at work or in shooting. And I help to teach and train different mental skills that individuals can apply in the midst of performance to preserve and or enhance performance quality. So my background's actually in educational and counseling psychology, but I specialize in sport and performance psychology.
Okay. Well, interesting. All right. Now, how we normally do this is we usually ask a few questions to kind of break the ice and get to know our guests. So we're going to start there. Leo, you are up.
Well, so the first thing I like to warn people that this is a really important question because it could set the tone for the rest of the interview. But before we get into that, I just want to point out to everybody that's listening, our combined IQs, three of us, I'm pretty sure fall very short of the docs. So we're going to try not to sound like Neanderthals today. That being said,
we are definitely mouth breathers.
What is your favorite movie?
Comes into play later.
Did you say my favorite movie?
Yes.
Favorite movie? Oh, that's hard.
Yes, ma'am.
I would have to say The Breakfast Club.
Oh,
Wow.
that's a new one we haven't had. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a strong pull. Okay.
You look disappointed.
All right, I think this is going to go well.
Yeah, very good.
Oh
pull.
no, I think this is going to go really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 We're good. We're good.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I
I'm
mean,
going to
it's
ask.
a movie about kids in high school.
Oh, I saw the movie in the theater. Remember, I'm older than you.
Just checking. You looked a little lost.
No. I remember it. Trust me. Old Molly Ringwald. I remember.
Yeah. Boom.
See?
That's
Take
right.
that. Mic drop. Anyway.
Wow.
Don't start. Because I'll be done. Okay. Anyway, my question for you, Doc, is what is your favorite book?
Oh boy. Favorite book. I don't know if I can say I have a favorite, but one that I very much like is Peak Performance by Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus.
Okay.
It has a lot of principles from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is just kind of this idea that we don't have to change just uncomfortable things or like change our thoughts. We can kind of accept what is and still perform despite that. So I liked how they kind of drilled down to those key points, and I think they conveyed it in a really applicable way.
Nice. Now, is this the same Magnus? I don't want to say a power lifter, but the gentleman that competes in the World Strongman competitions? Not the same one? Okay. Different Magnus.
Different
Just
one.
want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I was like, that guy?
There's not just one Magnus.
Okay,
There's
I was just
a whole bunch of them, especially in that competition. I'm always like, which Magnus is it?
yeah, exactly. That's why I just wanted to know which Magnus was it. So okay,
He could probably rip that book in half with his bare hands, though.
probably. So, Doc, my next question for you is: who is your favorite superhero? If you had to choose one, what would be your favorite superhero?
Not well versed on superheroes, but from the little that I do know, I would probably say Batman.
Okay,
Only because he doesn't really have a superpower, which I think is pretty cool.
that is
He
cool.
just kind of does his thing.
Yes, he does. He uses a lot of brain power. I like it.
Well, I mean, being rich helps, but it's not really a superpower. But it's, you know,
He buys.
I could be Batman if I was rich.
Could
They come at a hefty price, but that. It's funny because every time that comes up, I like to talk about the Punisher because he's just a dude that is just really good at getting beat up. Like there's no superpower. He just can take a beating and then just put it on somebody else. So,
Yep.
So we're gonna start kind of shifting into a little bit more of what we're going to talk about. So you do help professional and semi-professional shooters. Are you yourself a shooter, or is this just one of the realms that you exist in as far as people that you assist?
I'm not a shooter myself. I have shot a couple of times, but I don't compete. Had a friend who was in the shooting community and just word of mouth spread, and then connected with Rob Epifania, and things kind of took off from there.
Okay.
But you're not shooting averse. You're like, I mean, you would shoot if for funsies.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it the couple of times that I did. I actually shot more on an AR-15 than handgun, so it was a good time.
Okay.
All right, Doc, kind of a baller. Okay, cool.
I shouldn't have time for handguns.
She's like,
going bigger.
Yeah, she's like, man, give me the big stuff.
Right.
Anybody have a cannon back there I could shoot?
Right.
Those were legal to own in 1776. Just so everybody knows, 4th of July weekend, there's my cup. Okay. Now, unless the interwebs are incorrect, which there's always that possibility, but I don't think this is wrong. You played D1 softball at Butler?
I did, yes.
Okay. So we're going to start a little sports psychology on yourself.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. So when did you start playing softball, and when did you realize you were good enough to play at the college level?
I started playing softball in 1st grade, I believe. I obviously competed all the way through high school. So through college, when I was in high school is when I started getting recruited. So that was a good indication that I was doing something right. And yeah, I had the time of my life at Butler. It was the best 4 years that I've had.
Oh, wow. Okay. Because that's exactly where I was going next. Now, did you guys, well, not exactly next, but follow on next. Now, did you guys ever make it? I watched the this year's College World Series, and someone at work also follows it. So we were talking back and forth. Did you ever make it to the College World Series when you were at Butler?
No, I was a guest on TV, just watching it, but I was never there as an athlete. So
that's still pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in my couch watching it, meaning I was a guest in that sense. I wasn't actually.
Okay. All right.
Don't worry,
Now
I got the joke, and it was really good. Their synapses aren't firing all the way. He hasn't had all of his coffee yet.
Need more
He'll
coffee.
Get there. Yeah.
All right. So what position did you play?
In college, I played second base primarily. A little bit of outfield in my freshman year, and then I had a stint at first base just from some injuries, but primarily second base. And then prior to that, I pitched for 8 years all the way through college. Excuse me, high school. I keep mixing those up.
What was your? I get it. At my age, everything gets mixed up. So it's all good. Now, what was your best pitch?
My best pitch. I'm trying to remember. I had a pretty good screwball, which if you're not familiar, it cuts in on a right-handed batter, goes away from a left-handed batter.
Okay. Now, does it cut in and down or just in?
It can do both, but
Okay.
if you're just talking about a flat screw, it just goes in.
Okay. All right. Yeah, my best pitch was beanball. That's how I kept the pitchers away. I mean, the batters away. Now, what is your favorite? This is our most personalized question. What is your favorite memory from playing baseball at Butler? I mean, softball at Butler.
Favorite memory? My very last game of my senior season, we weren't in contention for anything, but it was my second to last at bat. I think I hit a home run, and it was just a very nice culmination for me. I'd only hit, I think, 6 in my 4 years, so it wasn't a very frequent occurrence, but I distinctly remember as I was rounding the bases, like soaking in that moment. So I remember that very vividly. That was
And
special.
who were you guys playing?
We were up at Rhode Island.
Okay.
They were playing
All
the
right.
losers.
They're playing what? What'd you say,
The
Leo?
losers.
The people that lost because she hit a dinger.
You kind of cut out a little bit, so it's hard for me to understand you. All right.
Usual.
Now your Instagram is like a gold mine of information.
Yes.
After Rob had mentioned you, I went to your, I looked you up on Instagram and went to your Instagram page. I was like, oh my gosh, there is a ton of information here. So, as you're well aware, I created a presentation for the interview. Let me go here and let me kind of slide this over here. There we go. Now I can share my screen. Boo, 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 boo. That's the one I want. And go. All right. Awesome. So this is just the cover slide here. So the things that I wanted to touch on with your Instagram was you talk about caffeine, breathing, processing visual information, sleep deprivation, and performance, which that's a really big one. I think we all have some questions about because not those two. They used to. But at some point in our career, all of us have worked 24-hour shifts. I'm currently working a 24-hour shift, and we changed. Our schedule used to be 24 hours on, 48 hours off. And that was plenty of time to recover for your next 24-hour shift. Well, now we go to, I'll use a Monday through Friday routine, just so you understand. Monday would be a 24. Then you get off Tuesday, you work a 24 on Wednesday, off Thursday, you work another 24 on Friday. And I've been on one of for our county, the busiest unit in the county on that 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 24 off, 24 on schedule. And that is brutal. So we'll get into, we have some specific questions about that when we get there. I really like the information you had about chronotypes and typecasting people, that type of thing. And then mood versus motivation, which I also thought was very interesting. So we'll start with our vitamin C, caffeine, because I literally live on caffeine. But I'm finding out that it's probably all psychological at this point because I don't know how much it's actually helping. So with that, we'll start with the benefits. Now on your Instagram, you had, if it's working properly, that's a pretty significant increase in vigilance of plus 20 to 35%. Marksmanship's up 25 to 30%, and reaction time's up 70%. That is a lot. Let me maximize. There we go. That's better. Now, in my notes, my question is, I get the vigilance and the reaction time with caffeine, but how do you get the benefits of the marksmanship? Is it focus from the caffeine or?
Yeah, I don't know for certain, but my guess would be that it's a byproduct of increased attention. So vigilance, attention, and reaction time are three kind of foundational cognitive skills that are enhanced by caffeine use in appropriate doses. So my best guess would be that because attention is enhanced, you're more focused on your target. The more focused you are on your target, the more likely you are to actually hit the target.
Okay. Are there, because you would know and I wouldn't, so that's why I'm asking. Do you know of any specific studies with caffeine and like marksmanship performance or?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit from Walter Reed sleep researchers. They look with military
Okay.
populations. So that's where this one actually comes from. I forget the specific population off the top of my head, but it was a group of soldiers who, one group didn't have caffeine, the other group did have caffeine. I don't remember if this particular one, they were sleep deprived as well, but these were the findings that they showed.
Okay. So basically they just proved they should keep the coffee in the MREs. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, and they actually manufactured caffeine gum for that purpose, if you're not familiar with it.
Oh,
Yes.
oh.
I actually have some of that myself.
I am aware of it, but I got out long before caffeine gum was before they even started putting Tabasco sauce in the MREs. So we had to bring our own. But interesting. Did they actually? Do you know if they actually put caffeine gum in them or they just used it for the study?
No, I believe they're standard issue with MREs now.
Wow.
Reason being is it gets into your bloodstream faster than if you're ingesting it as a liquid. So it'll activate in about 5 minutes or so versus caffeine that you're drinking would take about 10 to 15 minutes. So if you need a quick
through
burst,
the mucous membranes of the buccal cavity?
Yeah, through your cheeks.
Yeah, it's actually it's cheeks.
Oh, I thought you said teeth. I'm like, teeth?
No.
What?
No, through your cheeks. But it's actually interesting because I actually have some of that gum myself. And it's if you actually get the package will tell you if you are a civilian, you can only take like one or two. But if you are military, it actually says you can take up to X, Y, and Z amounts further. So it's actually pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's the civilian disclaimer so they don't get sued, but the military, since they can't sue you, take all you want. Boom. Pow pow.
Exactly.
There we go. All right. That was a conversation we had last night, Doc. And
Oh my God.
For like 15 minutes, we were all useless. We were laughing so hard. It was ridiculous. All right. So let's get in because I obviously take inappropriate dosing amounts. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So the information was non-habitual caffeine users, which excludes me completely, is 200 milligrams, habitual 300 to 400. But once you hit 600, I guess, you start getting negative effects and lethal. I assume that's a lethal one-time dose greater than 5,000 milligrams.
I believe it's cumulative. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure. In a day.
I feel like I could have easily broached that at some point. Wow. Okay. Now, the negative effects at 600. Do you know like what we're talking about? Like what?
Dave
How
should
does
be
it start
dead.
affecting? I should be.
So
Or brain
all of
bleed
these
something.
numbers should be taken with a grain of salt because there's a lot of factors that can affect how you process caffeine. If you use regularly, you're going to have a higher tolerance. Some people are more sensitive, just genetically speaking, to caffeine versus others. How much food you've eaten, how hydrated you are. There's a lot of factors at play. So these are all kind of general ranges. Generally speaking, when we get above 400 milligrams, we start to see, again, some of the negative effects. So maybe inattention, jitteriness, anxiety can start to kick up. Basically, our body's kind of mimicking a stressed response. So all of the limitations that come with being overly stressed can start to creep in.
Interesting. I would see the jitteriness. That's what I was thinking in my head. So
Mhm.
for a paramedic, jitteriness trying to start an IV is probably not the best thing. It's like having Parkinson's and trying to start an IV.
Right.
Yeah, not good. Don't mind me.
As the person's like, is this your first time doing it? No, I've been doing this for 20 years.
Right. All right. So best practices, very interesting. 200 milligrams every 6 hours. You got to avoid 6 hours prior to bed. I think that's probably understandable. Save caffeine use for performance. Now, so let's start with that first one. 200 milligrams every 6 hours. Is that for habitual or non-habitual users?
I believe this one was for non-habitual users. If you kind of pace that out, let's say you get up and you drink coffee at 8 o'clock, and then 6 hours later you're at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then let's say you're winding down for bed around 8 or 9, it usually rounds up to about 2 doses per day, 200 milligrams a piece. So it's not that you're drinking caffeine incessantly throughout the day. You want to try and limit it to up to 400 milligrams max, assuming that you're not overly dependent on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know there are studies out there now that show that it was a hydration article I read where they showed that caffeine in normal doses is not enough to dehydrate you. So you can actually get hydration from caffeinated beverages, where I think for a long time it was thought that those caffeinated beverages will dehydrate you. Have you seen anything more recently to contradict that?
I haven't, but I also haven't looked for it. That would be a better question
Okay.
for a performance dietitian. But I know that from the dietitians I have worked with, they always scoff when people say, well, if there's water in coffee. So I don't know that fully counts as your water intake.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, Save caffeine use for performance. Now, if you're like me, I'm using it pretty much every day. Now, some days though, I'll have 1 cup and that's all I have that day. So I'm trying to figure out the save caffeine use for performance. How would someone like me save caffeine use for performance? What does that look like for me?
Well, if you have a really high tolerance and you find that you need caffeine during performance, then rather than going higher to start, I probably would suggest trying to wean off during the times of the day where you really don't need caffeine. If it's just out of habit or it's not serving any particular purpose, if you can try to reduce that tolerance and then save that caffeine use for performance where it might have a bigger effect, that would probably pay off more. I know that's easier said than done, but the idea here is that if we're drinking caffeine regularly, our body's going to become desensitized to it. So if we were looking for a boost during performance and our body is so used to caffeine from our day-to-day drinking that that boost is now useless, then that might be something to consider. Is this caffeine I'm drinking now serving a purpose, or is it just out of habit?
The answer is yes.
Actually, it's funny. It's interesting you say that because when I was in college, I used to, of course, when you study for exams and everything like that, caffeine was like my friend. I mean, I was just doing anything to ever take caffeine, from no-dos to even taking the coffee beans and grinding them up and just putting them in my cheek and gum and just trying to get whatever caffeine I could get to stay awake to study and everything like that. And
put it in the eyeball. Works every time.
yeah. And now I've done so much caffeine that I can drink like so much caffeine and I'm like, it's not hitting me. I can just pretty much close my eyes and be done. Where I know other people that can be drinking it and they're just like bouncing off the walls and I'm looking at them like, you suck.
So was there a question with that or just a comment?
No, just a comment. Just a comment. No
Okay.
question. I didn't say it was a question. I was just saying I just found it interesting because when she said that, I'm like, yeah, I can relate to that. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that too. Now here's a specific question that I came up with with shooting and caffeine use. So like, I guess it was a couple months ago now, they had the Delmarva Championship. It's 2 hours away from me. So I drink some coffee on the way up because I have to leave at like 6, between 5 and 6 in the morning to get there. Then I have to shoot all day. So I'm drinking a little bit of coffee in the morning. I'm not a fast coffee drinker. So even though I drink coffee all the time, I probably drink no more than 2 cups of coffee a day. What I have found is and I'll ask you about that later, but the caffeinated drinks are the ones where I end up drinking a lot more of. But anyway, so it's 2 hours to get there. So let's say I've completed a normal coffee cup size worth of caffeine. So what is that, about 160 milligrams of caffeine? Then I have to shoot all morning. Then there's a lunch break. Then you shoot again all afternoon. For someone who's a habitual coffee user, 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day, if I drink a cup there, I almost feel like, for me, I throw a no-dose in my Hoist hydration drink. So I'm hydrating with Hoist. It's got a bunch of other electrolytes that I need, potassium, calcium, that type of stuff. And then after lunch, I do the same thing. I drink another Hoist with another no-dose, another 200 milligrams of caffeine. How does that sound for a game plan of caffeine use to try to maintain performance through an all-day match?
I mean, it sounds good. It's going to depend on the person. I know that's a really boring answer. Just how fast you metabolize caffeine, it's going to be different person to person. Again, have you eaten any food? But I think the fact from what you just described, you're kind of spacing it out over the course of the day. I don't see any glaring red flags with that, but I could be missing something. The idea is that we just don't want to become reliant on caffeine to where we can't function without it. So it can certainly supplement performance. It's really helpful in that regard. But also, if you find that you just need caffeine to function or to be awake, that just means that you're deficient on sleep, and you don't need more caffeine. You need more sleep.
Right. Yeah, I get that. No, and I'm just thinking of the hypervigilance portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
Wanting to be as close to the edge of being fully alert and vigilant as absolutely possible. So, when you're going through a stage, which I'm sure, having worked with Rob, what that's about, where you're constantly alert and not easily distracted by anything.
Yeah. And I would say, since you use caffeine regularly, and for other people who are also listening, just kind of pay attention to your body as well and test it out in training. If you notice that, let me try taking caffeine at this point, and then I'll wait so long, and then I'll basically mimic your dosing schedule that you would for a match, and just notice how your body feels and kind of tweak it from there. But it's going to be subjective based off of the person and how they process it.
Okay. All right. So I want to go back to save it for performance for a minute. So nationals for me is September 9th, 10th, and 11th. You mentioned, maybe trying to wean yourself off before you get into a big match where you can use it for performance. How someone who's a habitual user like myself, and look, I drink Bang energy drinks, I drink Rain at work because I know I'm tired, so I'm using an excessive amount of caffeine, because I think those are like 360 milligrams a drink. Most I've ever had is 2 in one day. That's a lot. But how long should someone like me try to wean themselves off before that first day at nationals, where I'm going to have some caffeine use for performance?
It's a very specific question. I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think just experiment ahead of time is all I can say, and see how it affects you. And if you notice that you've got withdrawal symptoms, or you're detoxing too quickly, so to speak, then kind of scale that back so that you're still, comfortable. But I can't speak to the specific timing, unfortunately.
Okay.
But somebody else smarter than I in that area can.
Okay. All right. We're going to go to the cautionary tale here. This is interesting. The first bullet I find very interesting. Ineffective after 3 nights of less than 5 hours of sleep. In the schedule that I'm on, that's pretty much 5 days for me of getting probably less than 5 hours of sleep because I use caffeine throughout the day at work to keep me attentive, which then means that I typically don't sleep well that night. Less than 24 hours later, I'm back at work because I get up at 3:30 in the morning to be at work by 6. So that Monday morning really starts at 3:30. I don't get off work till 6 the next morning, and then I'm back up at 3:30 again the next morning. How, when you say ineffective, like it has zero effect at all, or?
So this research comes from a study from a few years ago. They looked at individuals over the course of 5 days, and they were restricted to 5 hours of sleep per day. And they were given 400 milligrams. One group was given 400 milligrams of caffeine daily, and then the other group was given nothing. And what the researchers found was that the first 2 days, caffeine was helpful. By the third day, the caffeine group was on par with the placebo group. And by days 4 and 5, the caffeine group was actually performing worse than the placebo group. So basically, the caffeine, they developed a sleep-restricted caffeine dependence, or tolerance rather, in that short span. So their body wasn't able to process caffeine anymore, so it wasn't working.
Wow.
The only way to restore that is to get sleep, is what the take home of that is.
Now, were they, like we talked about earlier with the problems, the negative effects, were they experiencing any of the jitteriness or anything like that when they reached that third day or fourth day?
I don't believe so, because the caffeine wasn't really working anymore at that point. So
Okay.
it was as if they weren't taking in any caffeine.
All right. Now, with the sleep restoring effectiveness, is it just one night of 8 hours of sleep, or are we talking, what does that take?
Again, it'll be slightly dependent on the person, but it'll take at least a few days to get back. This particular research also showed that the caffeine group took longer to recover based off or compared to the placebo group. So
Wow.
it basically indicated that there was an overwhelming sleep debt that had accrued unique to that caffeine population versus the non-caffeine users. So not only is their performance getting worse than placebo group, but their recovery period is also significantly longer.
That's interesting, because what I have found, and now I'm wondering if it's because of all the caffeine I do use through the week, through those 5 days, is we get, after those 5 days of working and not working, we get a 4-day break off of work, and then you start the schedule again. And I'm finding that I'm tired throughout those 4 days still.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to do anything, and then you start the cycle all over again. So that's interesting. I wonder if that has something to do with the lack of sleep and all of the caffeine use.
Absolutely. And that was one of the high points of the article, was that it's a combination of caffeine usage and sleep restriction that results in slower recovery and greater sleep debt, meaning we just feel tired longer.
Okay. I'm going to make sure to cut this portion of the podcast and send that to my wife. I like it. All right. So the next thing, moving on from caffeine, vitamin C, we're going to vitamin B, which is breathing. Essential for life as we know it. Now, just so you know, Doc, all three of us have been or currently are paramedics. So this, I found, there was some stuff on your Instagram page that I saw that we'll be getting into that I wasn't even aware of. And that being nitrous oxide or nitric oxide. Now, I realize after seeing your stuff and then going and researching some things that they just discovered in 1995 that we actually produce this in our cells, in our nasal passageways, which I thought was very interesting. And there's a lot of benefits to this, but the joke I made earlier was, we're all mouth breathers. That's why we're a little slower on the uptake. Depending on whether you're a nose breather or a mouth breather, actually has a lot to do with a lot of stuff that I had no idea about. So just for the audience, I'm going to let them know what we have here if they're not reviewing this on YouTube. If they're just listening audio wise, like I said, it is produced in the nasal passages, and this is all by way of Dr. Sullivan. That's how I found all this out. It decreases resistance to blood flow in the lungs, so it vasodilates. So we're talking less chance of pulmonary hypertension, which I've seen in really oddly, mostly women. Increases arterial oxygenation, which is always a good thing. It's a bronchodilator, so it has beta-2 effects. And this is the part that I was even having a conversation with my wife about, which I thought was pretty cool, which explains why I always said I would never get COVID, is antimicrobial properties. So that nitric oxide mixing in there. So we already know that when air gets into your nose, it warms, humidifies, dehumidifies, moistens, all of that. And it now has the antimicrobial properties. I'm going to change. Shoot. Yeah. So I thought there was some. Wait a minute. I feel like I'm missing something here. I know what it was. I knew there was a question. You posted on your Instagram that, I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up. Humming during exhalation generates a 15-fold increase. Do you have any idea how that? I could not find that anywhere. Obviously, I'm just Googling, but how does that work?
Yeah, there's actually an article on this. I don't know the author off the top of my head, but I can share it with you if you're interested. I don't know if they know for certain, but their best guess is that basically in your nasal cavity, when you hum, it has vibration effects and it basically drums up the molecules. So it's like they're all up for grabs, and then you're able to take it in easier.
So kind of like tapping on a carbonated beverage where you see the bubbles coming up.
Yes. Yep.
That type of effect. Okay. Cool. Now it's funny because we're all in the fire department. We all do different things. Go ahead, Leo. Oh, I don't know what he was going to. What?
No, that was it. I'm going to cut this part out and send it to Elaine because she gets mad at me for humming all the time. I'm going to tell her it's good for me.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So us all being firefighters, there's a lot of people on CPAP in a fire station. I am not one of them, but there are a lot of people like that. And I found it interesting that people who are mouth breathers, you've got your increased blood pressure, increased resting heart rate. I'm going to skip the third one because I want to come back to that because I didn't understand it. Increased headaches, increased depression, which I also didn't understand the correlation. Increased dehydration of 42%, which I totally get because when you exhale through your mouth, you're losing a lot of moisture. So that makes perfect sense. And increased airway inflammation, which I kind of get. But the increased lower back pain and increased depression, how does that happen?
So for increased lower back pain, proper breathing says that we use our diaphragm when we breathe. A lot of us don't breathe into our diaphragm. We breathe high into the chest, which leaves our lower back region vulnerable to injury. When you breathe into the diaphragm, it stabilizes the spine, so it provides greater structural integrity for when you're moving. So all of this information comes from the Oxygen Advantage, which is where I got my certification through. It's a phenomenal resource. There's a book by the same name. Their website's really great as well as their Instagram. But basically, when we breathe low into the lungs, it activates our diaphragm, which helps, again, to basically think about if you got a pop can or a soda can, depending on where you're from, and you just blow air into that can and it puffs it out to provide stability. That's basically what's happening when you breathe low into the diaphragm, is it provides this pocket of structure around your spine so that it limits or reduces the incidence of lower back pain because you're moving more functionally.
Very interesting. I just learned something. Now, what about depression? How does mouth breathing increase depression?
So it's more when you breathe through your nose. There's 30 plus functions that your nose serves, one of which is just regulating your hormones. And so if we're breathing through the mouth, we're not getting that benefit. On top of that, breathing through the mouth triggers your stress response. So we're kind of just all screwed up hormone-wise, neurotransmitter-wise. So our brain isn't getting the restoration that it could. Another piece here is that when we breathe through the mouth when we're asleep, it also fragments our sleep. We have stressed sleep, so our brain isn't able to recover as well as it otherwise could, which can lead to, decreased sleep quality is correlated with depression.
Okay. Wow. Very interesting. Who knew that just breathing through your mouth can create so many problems?
Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole other list. I assume I get the dental health, decreased dental health, decreased deep sleep, decreased body temp. I thought this was interesting. Decreased blood flow to the brain by up to 50%. Is that just pressure in your neck, reducing the flow of blood through the carotid arteries, or? Yeah.
50% reduction in the carotids.
Wow. So if you got bruits, you're in deep kimchi. So if you don't know what carotid bruits are, be happy. That's a good thing. Decreased mental clarity. Is that because of those functions that the nose provides you're not getting?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
So let me ask you a question. So the people that are using the CPAP machines that are using the full mask, I know you're saying about using your mouth. It would be better if they had the nasal style versus the full mouth covering style. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and in an ideal world, obviously, you wouldn't have to use the CPAP. So again, I'm not a sleep researcher, full disclaimer here, but what the research has shown, at least from what the Oxygen Advantage has shared, is that when we breathe through our nose, because it has, we have a smaller circumference versus breathing through the mouth, that greater air pressure tightens and tones the muscles and tissues of the airway to make nasal breathing easier. We ideally want to breathe through the nose during the day, during physical exercise, and especially during sleep. So if we can train ourselves to breathe through the nose on a regular basis, we're able to increase the strength of our airways so they can support themselves while we're sleeping. So the day-to-day breathing is critical for that. And then there's also a product. Some people just use mouth tape to tape their mouth shut, just like a piece in the center. There's also a product, I'm not a sponsor, but a myo tape. It just goes right around the mouth with a hole in the center. And the idea is that it provides just enough tension on your face so that when your jaw starts to drop open when you're asleep, it'll keep it shut. So it helps to sustain nasal breathing throughout the night until your body is able to support itself.
Very interesting.
So duct tape is? It is allowed. I get it.
It's technically an option, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. And I like that, breathing through your nose tones and strengthens the airway. I mean, if you're a summer body, perfect. Kind of tighten up that whole area up there. It's good.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Now, here are some of the things we were just talking about. Widens the airways, greater airway pressure, which you just mentioned. Improves lung capacity. Is that because of the greater air pressure? Is it almost like a PEEP?
So it's breathing through the nose kind of correlates with other functional breathing characteristics. So another one is low breathing, which means we're breathing into the diaphragm, as well as slow breathing, meaning the rate at which we're taking air in. So whenever we breathe through the nose, it naturally promotes low breathing. It's easier to breathe into the diaphragm versus the chest when we breathe through the nose. And then it also takes longer to breathe in a full breath through the nose because the airways are smaller. So you can't get as much air in at once. So that combination of factors helps to improve the strength of our lungs, improve the strength of our diaphragm. It gives us enough time for that air to work its way down into the bottom of our lungs to thereby increase capacity.
So I'm going to interject a question here because being a former athlete myself, I remember back in the days of like cracking the ammonia inhalant sticks and sticking them up to my nose to basically open up the passages so I could breathe more air in. I'm assuming that was not good.
Probably not.
It felt good at the time. Don't feel guilty.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was like, oh my God, I can breathe. And I felt like I just taken all this, oxygen and everything of that nature. But after looking at your data and your information here, I'm just kind of like, ooh, yeah, I guess I shouldn't have done that.
There is actually an easier, safer way to get that same effect is if you do 5 strong breath holds, which just means that you're going to inhale and then exhale through the nose. Hold your breath until you have a moderate to strong air hunger or urge to breathe. And then after that point hits, you release, breathe through the nose for about a minute or so, and then repeat that 5 times. And that will naturally open up your airways.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Seriously, that is awesome.
But at the same time, it doesn't sound as fun as just sticking ammonium nitrate.
Definitely not.
I mean, so it just not it. When you go to the excitement factor, it just doesn't equate.
Mm-hmm.
Makes
I
more
don't think
sense
you
in
need
a way,
to
but
write all those tickets and sentences.
Yes. When I'm writing all these tickets for people parking in the fire lane that shouldn't be there, and I'm getting all upset and everything like that, and I'm gonna do my breathing control.
He's not going to be able to trust you.
all right. So the next one we got is the visual information. You had some information about fixation, visual fixation, permitting information processing within 3 degrees of visual angle, and you must maintain it for 1/10 of a second. You had 100 milliseconds, so I was like, okay, 1/10 of a second. Now, I probably should have put the other slide in here next. So I'm going to skip one and go. I'm going to go back and forth between these 2 slides because you also had saccade, which is eyes darting from one position to another. And you can only do 3 saccades in a second, so about 0.33 per saccade. Now, my question is, what allows us to recognize or see something when we see it out of our periphery and we're not necessarily fixating on it? Now, I know you're going to catch movement. Movement catches our eyes, but what actually, I guess I just need more information on this fixation thing.
So these definitions come from something called quiet eye training or quiet eye research, which was kind of my niche for my dissertation. So quiet eye is basically our ability to fixate or hold our visual attention on a specific target or location that's relevant to our task. And so for those parameters for a quiet eye fixation, it was holding your eyes on the target or location within 3 degrees of visual angle for at least 100 milliseconds. And that was what her name's Joan Vickers. She's like the pioneer of quiet eye research. She said that that's considered the quiet eye period, which is where the brain can actually process the information that it's looking at. So the idea with her research was that if we can see how athletes or performers are look at their visual behaviors, what she noticed was that experts or more proficient performers had longer fixations and fewer deviations in their eye movements. And that contributed to higher levels of performance. So basically meaning that as long as I'm holding my visual attention on my location for enough time or longer than not, I'm more likely to hit that target or hit the ball or whatever your sport you're playing.
Now, is there a point where you hold your gaze too long?
Probably only to the extent that maybe the moment has passed or you're no longer like within your window to execute whatever task you're doing. But basically the longer your eyes linger, the more information they can process.
Okay. Now, another part of this question is when I spent some time in the military, I had learned that for nighttime, you've got your cones and your rods. Your cones are used primarily in daytime, rods at night, but the rods are more on the outside. They're not in the center. So you end up getting a blind spot right in the middle of your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to look. They always taught us 5 to 10 degree offset vision. I don't know if that's too far off or what, but now how does fixation still work at nighttime, or is there something different there?
I haven't seen, or I didn't at least look up any research on nighttime for when I dug into this literature. But based off of what you're saying, it's obviously the case that if you're looking at something, fixating something in the dark, you're not going to be seeing it. So you have to adjust your focal point accordingly. But I don't know any specific research that looked at vision in the dark. Not to say there isn't any, I just haven't seen it.
Right. I get it. Yeah. I'm wondering if it's actually maybe 5 to 10 might be a little bit excessive, where it's just anything more than 3. If that 3 degrees is the normal visual angle. I thought it was interesting too, because you put in your Instagram the way you determine what the visual angle is. And I know you said it's the size of the outstretched thumb, but is that with your arm extended and then your thumb extended out?
Yep.
Let me get it back in the screen there. Okay. Because that's not a lot of space.
Not at all.
Okay.
Another way you can test that is if you put both thumbs out and then you just slowly pull them apart, but keep your eyes in the middle, you'll notice very quickly how blurry your thumbs become after you just move them. So it just reinforces that visual acuity area is very, very small.
Okay. Now I have a question for you then. Now, when I do that, 2 thumbs out, I got them together and then I move them. When I move them that far apart, I have 3 images. I have 3 thumbs. Is that, I don't know if you go beyond that, you start getting 4 thumbs that you're too far out. Does that mean anything at all?
I think it just means that you've lost focus.
Okay. Well, that's not a surprise. All right. So I want to go back to saccade for a second. And the movement of your eyes preventing being able to focus and fixate on an object and for what you need to do. Are there any things in particular that cause this to happen?
Stress. Definitely.
Oh.
So
okay.
anytime that we're under threat or we're perceiving that we're under threat, our eyes will naturally scan our environment looking for threats. So even if there's not a physical threat in the environment, even if it's just mental stress or something that you're perceiving, your body responds as if it's under attack. So it will start to look for that threat so that it can seek it before it gets sought.
Very interesting. Okay.
It's really good to know when you get pulled over for driving drunk and they're looking for visual nystagmus. They'd be like, it's just saccade, bro. Science. I'm gonna take this and be like, it's saccade. I'm good. I'm not drunk.
That's hilarious. All right. So blinking is a 1/10 of a second, but you can preserve information from a previous location. I guess that just means you're not losing anything when you blink your eyes.
Right.
Now, in all of your studies did and with performance and these studies you've read with soldiers and things like that, was there anything in there about people who shoot and blinking and ways to train people not to blink when you have the recoil of a firearm or weapon being fired?
As far as I know, I don't think we can train that away. I think that's just something we have to deal with.
Okay. And anxiety. So I put in the first shooting stage of the day and you're the first shooter, that creates stress for people. Not everybody, but some people. So I can see where, like you said, saccade being a stress induced function, I can see where that would create a saccade. But how would you coach somebody? Like, let's say I'm going to nationals, and for some reason, even though my last name starts with an R, they're like, Riddle, you're shooting first. How would you coach someone to cope with the anxiety, knowing first stage, first day, you're up, everybody's watching you?
Well, I mean, there's different routes that you could take, but I mean, first is just your interpretation of anxiety. Is some people view it as a threat, some people view it as a challenge. So coming up with ways that we can perceive anxiety differently, view it as, an opportunity. It's your body's giving you energy. How can I channel this energy versus just going automatically to a threat response where I'm under attack, I'm in defensive mode, something's wrong. That can be debilitating to performance. At the end of the day, it's all in our head. Like, how we perceive the situation is up to us. So if we're able to entertain a different possibility or to view stress as something that's actually helpful to us, that we can use, it's sharpening my attention. It's helping me focus. Let me leverage that versus let me get rid of that. I have to, I can't perform with this thing. Swapping that out for let me leverage this thing so that I can use it to my benefit. And then in terms of if saccades are a factor for you, rest your eyes on something for a few seconds. Just let them sit there. That calms things down internally. If my eyes aren't darting, my body doesn't respond as if it's under threat. If my eyes are calm, my body perceives that I'm safe. We can relax, and that has a reinforcing effect.
Okay. So this year's College World Series, I don't know if you watched any of it, Texas and Oklahoma. Everybody knew they were going to win anyway. They were ridiculously good this year. But you're that Texas batter, and this is you're down by one. You got a runner on base. This is the last out. You either do something or your World Series is over and Oklahoma is a champion. There's a lot of stress on that person to perform. How would you tell them the same thing? Like, that's what you need to do in order to be able to overcome the stress that they're feeling?
I mean, for that type of situation, as much as you can, just go back to basics. Is see ball, hit ball. What do I need to do to make contact with this ball? Get down a bunt, move a runner, get them back to the task, not the situation or the circumstances. Because hitting the ball, whatever coach is calling you to do, the fundamentals of that are no different. It's just the circumstances that have changed. So if we can recognize, yes, this is a special circumstance and the fundamentals are still the same, what are some cues I can tell myself to make sure that I'm still playing softball, I'm not letting the moment get the best of me?
Okay, so just whatever cues you need to stay within the moment and not be overwhelmed.
Right.
Okay. All right. That's interesting because there are people out there who use focus phrases right before they start shooting. Until next time.
Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.